honored to be here amongst you. I'm going to start this talk by asking you to think back to that day, 9/11, 10 years ago, and the tragedy that happened. Okay, quickly, as you're thinking back, were any of you happy or celebrating the tragedy that happened?
No. I remember it very clearly. I went over to a friend of mine's house and we Right.
Well, just hold that memory because right after that happened, watching and my mother-in-law had called me the second that something started happening. She's in Ohio, and she, knowing that I am a researcher on these kind of things, she called. And so I started watching on the television as soon as something happened. And it's devastating. It was emotionally traumatizing. And in order to get a little bit of distance from the trauma, I went out from watching the Twin Towers be attacked, and I picked a big bowl of blackberries just to try to get some equilibrium tonight. But it wasn't long before I started writing. And I started asking questions, and I started putting these questions on the internet. And as I did so, the reaction from the media, as well as individuals out there, they began to attack not only me, but other people like myself that were asking questions as to who and what actually happened. What was really going on here? And so I'm quoting to you from our local Oregonian. It says, on the 19th, they started attacking people like myself. They said, rumors are particularly apt to circulate in a climate of fear, particularly on the internet. And then they say, attacks give extremists new ammunition. The extreme right and the extreme left have some extreme similarities, including their hatred for federal and international governments, said Randy Blazak, a professor of sociology at Portland State University and an expert on U.S. hate groups. So it is not surprising that extremes from both ends could see something positive from these attacks. And then the paper goes on to say, while publicly professing sympathy for the innocent victims of the tragedy, they privately reveled in the attack on the World Trade Center. How incredible. You take someone like me, and I really feel the pain of people, and I was devastated. I was hurting. I'm sure the rest of you were in a lot of pain too. Recently, I went to an international Japanese church because I wanted to hear a sermon in Japanese, and they were talking about the Fukushima disaster and all that's happening in Japan. I could barely sit through the sermon because I just wanted to cry so much over what's happening over there, These traumas are devastating to us. And then for somebody in the news media, did any of you get a call right after 9/11 and somebody say, how did you feel about this? No, but they turn it on. They decide to defend the system and then demonize us by saying, oh, these heartless people out there that are asking questions. You and I, we were asking questions to find out who the real criminals were, what had really happened, and the news media was covering it up and attacking us as being heartless. Absolutely amazing. So within a few days, right after they wrote this attack on people, they never called me and asked how I felt, but they're going to say that I'm heartless, that I was celebrating over this. So this is something I put out over the internet. I said, during the first month following the 9/11 crimes, I saw many intelligent, good questions come over the internet about the crime. Dozens of internet articles have asked important, insightful questions to help us solve the crimes of the 9/11 tragedy, which the establishment newspapers and other media have ignored and appear trying to cover up. In fact, I know from some newsmen that their bosses have given instructions to their writers not to cover certain important facts and questions and lines of inquiry. How dare they hide things from you about the biggest crime so far of the 21st century? You have a right to know these things. If America was attacked and America is still the target, then don't you have a right to know who attacked you, how they attacked and why? If Osama bin Laden attacked America, not our government, not a battleship, but the man in the street, you and I, then don't we, the intended victims, have a right to know what our would-be killer wants to say to us? And let's get this fact straight, whether Osama bin Laden carried out the attack on the World Trade Center or not. He had clearly declared war on all of Americans, skipping down. Because the establishment news is covering up the facts about the 9/11 tragedy, because they are encouraging you not to go to the internet for answers, and to disregard anything anti-government extremists would say, I think you should read the kind of questions the news media should have asked but won't. The fact that these obvious questions are not being asked by the establishment media makes them accomplices to the crime. They are covering up a crime and deserve to be indicted by the American people. And for those who are legalists, yes, Black's Law Dictionary says it is possible to be an accomplice to a crime by helping after the crime is committed. They put me in prison for 8 years for allegedly knowing about a bank robbery. Well, let's extend that thinking. If there were people that knowingly knew about this crime or are accomplices by covering it up, shouldn't we have the same legal thinking applied to these people?
Should be prosecuted.
Yes, the news media should be prosecuted as accomplices for covering up one of the biggest crimes that ever happened. Now, today, this is kind of a general outline of some of the things we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss the process. We're going to discuss some basic symbols. I've been locked up. I was asked to give this talk on the symbols and meaning of the 9/11 attack, and I agreed to it. But I also realized that I lacked one key ingredient. I don't know what my audience knows. It's hard to speak to an audience without knowing where they're at. So you're going to have to help me with this. We're going to work on this together. Because I don't want to come up here and insult your intelligence and pretend like I know all this stuff that you don't. You may know plenty more than I do. Okay, hold your comments until after the talk, because this is being videotaped, and we got to do things in an orderly fashion. Okay? So let's look at one of the most basic symbols that we have involved in this thing. Come over here, maybe. Towers. What does a tower symbolize?
Power.
Power?
Financial power.
Power?
Well,
Just towers in general.
ballot symbol.
Pardon me?
Ballot symbol.
Ballot symbol?
Tarot card.
It's a tarot card of it, yeah.
Church.
Church.
A symbol.
Okay.
Hierarchy.
Hierarchy? Tower of Babel. Okay.
Represent a social strata.
Here, come over here. We've got
Social strata.
okay, and now I want to share some of my hold your comments, so I put a few more up here. I think it's important that we get the concept of security and protection, because towers towers throughout history have represented or symbolized security and protection. That's at a subconscious level, what people think of when they think of a tower, is they think of security and protection. For millennia, people have used towers as a way to protect themselves. That's why you have the Jehovah's Witnesses magazine, the Watchtower, right? It's there to protect people. So it's to protect and warn. To protect and warn. Okay. And it's a formable building. Let's write that down here because abbreviate this. And it's similar to a house. So where I'm going with this is, let's go back to this key thing here I've said here, security and protection. And as an archetype of the mind, we're talking about the kind of archetypes that people that try to get into the mind, the subconscious would be thinking about. As an archetype of the mind, if you destroy a tower, you're destroying somebody's security and protection. Destruction, I don't know if this is in the way of the camera, but destruction of one's security and protection. Okay? I think everybody here probably would agree with me that there was a reason that these targets were picked. Is there anyone who thinks that these were random? No. They were not random. They were meant to be iconic. In other words, these targets were picked out to support myths and images that the people that designed this attack wanted people to get. Okay? And so they're wanting people to feel a sense of insecurity and that their protection is coming. Okay, Okay,
do you want more paper on the wall?
I'm going to stick some paper over this because
I was thinking this good paper.
this will work. Fresh board here. I don't even have to erase. This is great.
You need electricity for that.
Okay.
One thing you did put down, like a formidable structure and also the social strategy.
Okay. So let's go to the next thing, which is twin towers. We're not just dealing with a tower, but we've got twin towers. So now we've got a whole new set of icons or symbols or symbolic meaning here. So what does twin tower evoke from you? What is that symbolic of?
Double tower.
Pillars.
Yeah.
Exactly. It represents lots of pillars. Pillars is a good summary because there's a lots of pillars. Let's see if I can say some of the pillars. We will. We've got. Let's see if I can. Gilkin and Boaz are the names that they give some Masonic twin pillars, and there's the twin pillars. There's the twin pillars of Hercules, and the twin pillars of Hercules has a history in itself, because that was taken as part of the logo for the Spanish Habsburgs. Okay, and the Spanish Habsburgs put their twin towers, their twin pillars, on Spanish dollars. Then the Americans started using Spanish dollars.
The pillar dollar.
And no, that's not where I'm going. Where I'm going with it is that's where the two pillars came in the dollar sign. You see, there's a history to a lot of the symbols we use. For instance, 100 is what a percent is. So what we did was we took one of the zeros, put it here, one of the zeros up here, and we took all of these lines and went like that, and we came up with a percentage sign, which was just a scrambling of 100. Well, there's a history behind these two signs here. It goes back to the Habsburgs and the Spanish dollar. That's how we got that twin towers there, the twin pillars. Okay. Then again, as somebody was saying, we've got the twin towers symbol here. We already mentioned that on the past one, so I'm going to skip that. We've got the twin columns between heaven and earth. Twin towers or columns between, I have to abbreviate here, between heaven and earth. And does anybody know offhand what's located there at the Twin Towers? That's where Plato's Atlantis was. It was also where Bacon's New Atlantis was. And what was Bacon's New Atlantis? Bacon's New Atlantis was the New World where mankind was to revolve themselves and return back to the lost golden age. The first revolution in history, the word revolution hadn't occurred until the American Revolution. And the reason it was called a revolution was because the people that led it were into the occult. There was, now, holding the bands, because I know some people are going to go, well, it was a bunch of Christians that did this. The symbology behind the word revolution means, it came from the word revolve. And it was to revolve us back to the golden age that was lost, that was Atlantis. You can go back and historically see why they used the word revolution. It meant to revolve us back to the Atlantean golden age. And that was here where the Twin Towers were.
What's the Spanish Habsburg Twin Towers mean? What was the meaning behind that?
The pillar dollar.
The Twin Pillars of Hercules was I'll use a different color here. Habsburg, and you can spell Habsburg different ways.
The pillar dollar.
Logo. There's a Habsburg logo. They were a royal family.
Yeah, I was
And-
wondering if they borrowed it from the Twin Pillars of Hercules.
That was, yeah, the Twin Pillars of Hercules
Okay.
was off the coast of Spain, and so they used that. What they did was, when they kicked the Muslims out of Spain, they took that as a logo because they said that no Muslims were to cross that. It's like a barrier, a gate. And then we've got, when we deal with twins, we've also got the twins of Gemini, which is associated with the god Mercury, which is also known as Hermes. And Hermes, or Mercury, depending on what name you want to give it, is the god of trade and commerce. So, and then another thing with twin is Janus, which is the twin-headed god. And this ties back into the caduceus too, which caduceus, just a U. Sorry. Caduceus. And boy, I don't know if I can find it offhand. Missing one of my books here. Oh, here? Underneath it. Here we go. I have something showing the caduceus. And, okay, here we go. This is the caduceus right here. It's not only a Illuminati symbol, but it's a symbol that's been used around the world. It's two snakes in equilibrium. Okay, now the meaning behind it is these two snakes. If you were to go back and into the mystery religions, you will find a concept. It's called Gnosticism. And the Illuminati are Gnostics, and what they do is they believe that good deeds must balance with bad deeds. So we have a balancing between two twin snakes that bring things into equilibrium. And that's those opposing forces balancing each other is a way to create a higher static form. Okay? That's the balance of witchcraft and Satanism. And this is from Sumeria. This is from Switzerland. You can find this in ancient India and other places. You can find it in Buddhist countries in Asia. And while I have this page, I'm going to talk to you, because maybe I can bring this in later, so that I don't have to, because I'm trying to give as much as I can within an hour. When I was researching the occult, I kept bumping into a system where one symbol could stand for another symbol, that concept could stand for another one, and so I started realizing something, and I put something together. I put all the pieces together. You won't find this anywhere else. Nobody else had tied it all together. But once I tied it all together, it made a tremendous amount of sense. And I realized that I developed kind of a key to help people understand things. Okay, so there are 5 interlocking icons or symbols that all can be represented by a snake. And they're all interchangeable. It's really most amazing. This is something that if you get into witchcraft, Satanism, the occult, you're going to start, you'll learn, right? You won't see any chart like this, but you'll get a piece here, a piece there, where subconsciously you'll realize it. But Lucifer, who's also known as the light bearer, can be represented by a snake. Man's search for wisdom can be represented by a snake. Sun worship, which is also the same as energy, both energy and sun worship can be represented by a snake. The Kundalini force can be represented by a snake. And the regenerative principle, which is phallic worship and sex worship, can also be represented by a snake. And all of these things are interchangeable. So I can use the regenerative principle to stand, in other words, phallic worship, to stand for Lucifer. You've got 6 concepts there that can be interchanged. And that pertains to some of the icons that we're dealing with here in 9/11. One of the icons we're dealing with here is fire. Well, what does fire mean to you? Well, fire would represent war, would represent chaos, or, as I just showed you there, fire could actually represent some of these other things. Fire could represent wisdom. It could represent, Lucifer. It could represent a number of things. It could represent Prometheus. And Prometheus himself, or Apollo, in the occult world, would represent Lucifer, who's just the light side of Satan. Okay? If you go back and look at the Apollo myths, you'll see that all of the attributes attributed to Christ, the virgin birth, and all these other things were also attributed to Apollo. So there were 13 icons that had similar myths to them prior to Christ. They all had the virgin birth and blah, blah, blah. So there were a lot of imitators of Christ even before he came. So these things are evoked by twin towers.
Number 11.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Number 11. See, I knew my audience was going to know a lot of this cooperation. And Samson's, which was really God's, revenge on pagans. If we look at Judges, at the story of Solomon, he had had his eyes blinded. They took him to the temple of Dagon, and they were going to make sport with him. And he put one hand on one pillar and one hand on the other pillar, and he pushed the two pillars apart. So the twin pillars are also a representative of Samson's revenge on pagans. Now, some of you and some of the people that watch this on YouTube are not trying to be Christians. But I'm going to tell you this, if I'm going to be honest with the symbols and the icons of 9/11, it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not, because in dealing with the Illuminati for many years, I came to realize that they use the Bible probably more than Christians. And when I was out there on circuit giving talks on the Illuminati, I used to ask my audience, what do you think the favorite occupation for Illuminati kingpins is? And they'd be like, well, politicians, lawyers or something. I'd say, no, Christian clergymen, because that's the best front. And the Bible is used for mind control triggers and mind control programming a lot. So any of these icons and symbols that have religious, biblical significance are not only going to be used as a message from God, but are going to be used, surprisingly, I mean, it blew me away, but it's going to be used by the Illuminati too, in a very mind-blowing way, which I think, what was the minute I got started, so I have an idea.
About 1:15, 1:20.
I have until 1:15.
No, you have until 2:20.
Okay, I have until 2:20.
30 minutes.
Okay, I've got 30 minutes. Wow, we just got cranked up on this. just got going. Wow. Well, I'm beginning to realize
Give him another half an hour, Ted.
that this might be more like. Let me see if I can work this all in. Okay, let's go back to towers for a minute. Because somebody was very astute. This is the tower, or the blasted tower. It's Aleister Crowley and the Toth deck. And this relates to the 9/11 event in several ways. Numerologically, it relates to it, but this has to do with the Eye of Shiva. And as you know, Shiva representing destruction and murder and war.
I don't know if it matters to your argument, but that's not the Crowley deck. That's Wade Strider deck.
Okay. And I was under the understanding it was the Toth. Okay. But it is an Aleister Crowley.
He bases on that.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying that this particular image is
earlier.
Yeah. Right. This is
That's not Crowley.
yeah, right. And this is also an occult from an occult deck. This is the tarot card, and this tarot card represents destruction. And here we see the Illuminati all-seeing eye. Now, if you were to go to ground zero today, they have covered ground zero with countless all-seeing eyes. So they have, like Kilroy was here, this is what we did, you know. They have left their symbology there big time. And then the final one on a tower is this card here, which is lightning struck tower. So we see destruction. We see towers representing protection, and then the destruction of that showing you that you're vulnerable, that you can't protect yourself. And that's one of the archetype myths that the planners of 9/11 wanted people to subconsciously grasp. Okay? Now we have the planners of this not only touching our subconscious mind, but we also have them doing symbols to the conscious mind too. And one of the things this was to represent jihad, right? Well, you know, the Palestinians or bin Laden or something, you know, jihad against America, you know. That was one of the things that this whole thing was to represent. So, I've only gotten started on all the icons on this, but I want to interrupt this this was interesting. In the 1990s, it was like somebody had been reading my books or something. I don't know. I did a 7-volume series on the Illuminati. The who, what, where. If you want to know, if you really want to see how it all lays out organizationally, who it is, who the families are, how they operate, on and on. And these are 2 of the books that I wrote on the Illuminati mind control. The third one, I don't have an English copy, but this is the Japanese translation. Now, one of the things that the news media said is they came out and said that I'm a self-styled author. Now, I've been several times in books in print, and there's half a dozen publishers that publish my stuff, but they say I'm self-styled. I just invented that I was an author. Well, you've right here seen one published book on my part that's in a foreign language, Japanese. Most of my books I've loaned out, so I don't. And if I brought them all, it takes a big box to show all those books that I've written. But another thing that they have said, because it demonized me, is it said that I lied about going to West Point. If I were to show you the howitzer, which is a yearbook, I could show you, and that was my West Point picture. You know, I did indeed go to the United States Military Academy. So you go on the internet, and they have demonized me, just like we were reading earlier. Anybody who's trying to get to the truth, who's trying to find out who the criminals of 9/11 are, is being demonized. Wow. So is that a cover-up? Does that not make these people that are preventing us from getting to the truth accomplices? If they'll give me 8 years for allegedly knowing about a bank robbery, what about all these other people that knew? We know factually that they knew about 9/11. How many people were warned ahead of time not to go to the towers? And we know who warned them and who stayed away. Is that not knowing about a crime? Okay. Well, being that I'm in poverty, I wasn't able to bring all of the different amounts of money, and also, since I'm limited for time, it's probably just as well that I don't. But if you take a $1 bill, 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100, and you pull them all correctly, the same way, you pull them all the same way, it makes a motion picture, a flip chart. And you can see, and one of my friends did that And you go through the flip chart, it's a little motion picture of the towers coming up and then the towers being hit by an airplane and falling down. These people have known about this for a long time. I spent a lot of years trying to help people that had been members of the Illuminati. I was never in the occult. I was never in the Illuminati. I had compassion for these people. And that's one reason why my books and research are so special, is because for the first time, people got an inside look at the Illuminati, because I was working with these people that had been in the Illuminati, and they helped me understand the law. Right? And from talking to these people, various people that I would talk to would sit down with me and they would say, Fritz, I was in a meeting at such and such place at such and such time, and they ran through the events that were going to happen 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now. These events are planned ahead of time. 9/11 was planned back when this money was first printed and designed. This thing's been on the drawing boards for a long time. And you're like maybe thinking, well, that's real strange. How could it be that this has been, that somebody in the know has known about this? I mean, the news media told us, or I should say the government was allowed by the news media to tell us, nobody could have dreamed of this happening. Oh, nobody could have thought of this happening. Really strange. But we get into looking at Hollywood's movies, and I pulled these off. This is a Hollywood movie, Escape from New York, and here in this movie, they have the Twin Tower, and they've got it targeted there for destruction. Emergency response to terrorism, self-study. That was part of this movie back then, long before 9/11. 1976. Here we have this guy representing big business, grabbing the two towers and destroying them. Here we have, in 1976, on Sesame Street, the monster. Well, what's his name?
Cookie Monster.
Yeah, the Cookie Monster, exactly. Cookie Monster's attacking the Twin Towers. Okay. 1992, we've got a comic book showing the smoking tower. The Twin Towers are being attacked. 1991, another comic book showing the Twin Towers being attacked. We even get such things as The Simpsons involved, where they have 9/11 with the towers in the cartoon, long before 9/11 became the date that the Twin Towers were taken down. Now, I know from working with people in the Illuminati, they've told me how they do these things. They put this stuff in, and it has a whole series of reasons as to why they do this stuff ahead of time. Well, one is they tell their people after the fact, you can see that we planned this. Look, our signature's all over it. Ha, ha, ha. Right? We've been, there's a lot of other things involved, and I may or may not get to them, depending on how time goes here. But there's other reasons why they implant all the symbolism before they actually do it. It revolves around mind control triggers, and which is what these books are written about. These are written about, in fact, I'll just jump into that because I'm not sure how much time I'm going to have. In fact, our last speaker has got a book here on Tavistock Institute, which was involved in, it was one of the institutions that was researching mind control techniques that were put together in a sophisticated package. This thing's, I got the privilege to expose this Illuminati mind control, this total mind control, that's been going on for thousands of years. In the 20th century, it was made more sophisticated. And one of the things that's developed within the the victim of the mind control, excuse me, cameraman, moving around on me. See if I can find. Let me show this to you first. This is a page out of a book showing that when you take MRIs and other scans of somebody who's a multiple personality and somebody who isn't, their brains are actually physically different. Now, the mind control works off of creating multiple personality disorder, which is called DID nowadays. And these are some of the books by victims of this kind of mind control that covers. And what they do is after you are subjected to that kind of mind control, you have thousands of triggers and codes in there. And so this all relates, there's a whole deeper level to the icon and symbology of 9/11 than just the simple stuff that we're dealing with here. When I started working with these people, I spent a number of years in whatever capacity I could, giving them therapy or counseling or help in any form I could. And my house was open 24/7. People would come from around the world, and they might stay at my place for a month or two while we tried to give them some help. Free. It was all free. And in working with these victims of the mind control, there's certain structures that are built into the mind. I know I'm talking up here, and I haven't had the time to lay the groundwork on this. We're just kind of going into the heart of something, without laying the foundation for you to understand. But this came, and I wasn't able to print it out in black. It comes right out of this book here, which was published in 1996, long before 9/11. So this has to do with the mind control. This is research that was done way before 9/11. But you'll notice in me showing these structures that are built into the mind, these are controlling structures. Here we have a castle with two towers, right? And here we have this revolving thing with icons that are symbols that is a timepiece, right? Well, within the mind of these mind-controlled slaves, which is what the Illuminati do with their members, they can reset the clock. And what I discovered is they were using watershed events as a way to reset the clock. Okay? So what I'm telling you is that there's people out there under mind control, and when they would see on the television the Twin Towers coming down, that would do things within their programming. It was a programming trigger to set their clocks. Now, maybe they have programming to do this, this, and this. That programming is not kicked in until they see Princess Di killed or they see the towers go down. We've got Twin Towers here in Portland, right? The convention center. And one of the people I worked with had programming around those Twin Towers in the convention center. Now, talking about twin pillars, we were talking about Joachim and Boaz. This is the New Age magazine, which is the official organ of the Supreme Council, the 33rd degree Freemasonry. It's been renamed the magazine in recent years. But here's your twin pillars, or your twin towers. So, this, what I started to show you, is a game. It's just a game. But somebody came out with this in the 1990s, and the name of it's Illuminati New World Order. And these cards represent different things of Illuminati control. On the back, you see the puppet master, and you see the strings going to New World Order, right? Well, interestingly, look at some of the cards that they came up with back in the 1990s. Here's the Twin Towers, and it says terrorist nuke. And then here's the tidal wave, it almost looks like Fukushima there. And then it says nuclear accident. Media connections, military-industrial complex, the corporate bastard, energy crisis, bigger business, multi-oil. These are all cards you can play in the game. Hollywood, what I call Hollywood, Vatican City, censorship, whispering campaign, upheaval, gun control, Federal Reserve, energy powers, law and order, the guy with his Billy Club, charismatic leaders, Pentagon. So you see in this game a lot of cards that would have. You can come up and look at it after we finish. Interestingly, huh? But who would have thought the Twin Towers nuked, huh? And that's one of the cards in this Illuminati game that came out in the 90s. Pretty fascinating.
You put that up.
Inside you'll find some paperwork. Okay, so the bottom line of what we're looking at is this attack was meant to be iconic. It was something to support myths and agendas. Our country lives off of myths. What is a myth? And I was going to write this up, but I'm going to run out of time if I do. So just listen carefully. A myth is an organization of symbolic images and narratives. Okay? That's what our country's working off of. Okay? America uses symbols and icons and myths to describe itself. We're under social control that uses self-delusion. They give the public what the public wants to believe. And they coach us in this. So 9/11 was part of a delusion, part of a myth. And one of the myths, and granted, there's a kernel of truth to this. You know, like in World War I, the Germans had defeated the Russians. They had moved their vast army from the Eastern Front to the Western Front, and they were going to finish off the rest of the Allies. And America came in right at the last moment and saved the Allies. World War II, again, we have a similar appearing situation. America comes into the war. We turn the tide in the Pacific. We help turn the tide in the African front, helping the British, and our Lend-Lease helps the Russians turn the tide on the Eastern front. So again, we have this image of America coming to the rescue. Okay, but we're still operating under this delusion right now that we're on this providential mission to save the world from itself. Okay, that's one of the myths that America operates on. And our news media promotes that. How often in the last month have I heard, just randomly in like in a restaurant or store or something, Americans complaining about how much we help the world? Our news media doesn't tell us that when there's a disaster someplace, a country like Germany or Japan or some of these other countries that are poorer than us actually give more money than we do. But our newspapers don't report it. They make it sound like we're the only ones that help anyone. We aren't. But this is part of the delusion, is that we're on this messianic, and part that works with this is because we are so strong. If we're so strong, then we must be good, you know. And so we've got these dreams of righteousness, and this all ties into the myths of the Twin Towers and the icons and the symbology involved in all of this. One of the goals of military propaganda, and it's stated in their books, is when you're going to do propaganda, you want to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Well, those were all thrown into the 9/11 thing. It was following military procedure. You also, as you're doing something like this, do what's called pacing. that means you throw a lot at the person. And you also throw in distraction, which is used to overload the brain. And then you prime. Prime means you place thoughts into people's heads. And while I was watching, within a few seconds of this whole thing going down, it blew me away. All of the announcers, because I switched to the 3 different news medias, they were all saying the same. They were all saying, we don't have any idea who did this, but it looks like the work of Osama bin Laden. They're climbing. There's 1,000 different candidates or organizations that it could have been, but they all 3 were priming that suggestion. It looks like the work of Osama bin Laden. You know, and oh man, I was sick to my stomach because I know that this is propaganda following the ABCs of how to do it, and people are going to fall for it. They're going to fall for all the symbology and everything. And it was what the public wanted to believe, you know. We're the righteous people being persecuted by these terrorists, and now we've got to go on a crusade. But as I've already talked about the media, in my opinion, I think most of you would probably agree with me, is intellectually and morally useless. In fact, it gets worse than that. Like I say, we're talking about accomplices to a crime. So they take 9/11, they're using these symbols, they're wanting it to be iconic, they're wanting to hit your subconscious, they're wanting it to hit your conscious, and it's a show. And that's, I think, one of the most important messages to take out of this whole thing about realizing that we've been fed a bunch of lies about 9/11, is to realize it was a staged production, very well staged, to evoke certain things in your mind to follow an agenda based on myths. And they use these images to create an effect. It was a magical illusion. It was a fluid sleight of hand, really. See, when you do the magic trick, what appears to be done, that's what's revealed, and then there's the concealed back view, what's actually done, that's the concealed part. Or what some people call disinformation design, or what, when I was a kid, used to be called simply deception. There's a lot of connections between the Twin Towers and 11, and I want to get to that. I'm going to run out of time here on so much. 11 occurs in so many different ways in this, and since I'm running out of time, I'm going to explain that 11 and 11 is a trigger, and I'm quoting from an occult book. It says 1111 is a trigger to activate light workers into their higher purpose. Remember, I was telling you that some of the icons and some of the events around 9/11 were used for the mind control, and this book just actually comes out and says it. Plus, the occult significance of 1111 is that it's a door. Okay, and I'm quoting right from somebody else writing this, and they're talking about on 11/11, you know, walking through this door on not 11/11. This is what this is all about: healing, to take a fragmented soul and make it one again. This day will be the activation point, the day of great universal strength that can enable you to make these grand realizations of the grand reality. Remember, grand is a Masonic term. To feed these that you call light workers into a higher place. So 1111 is an icon, a symbol, a magical numerology to represent a door into a new world. Okay? And that's what we had here. It was an encoded trigger. It means the time of completion is near. And a pathway. a bridge doorway, a watershed event, and that's indeed what it had. 9/11 has a lot of significance too, because on 9/11/1972, that's when you had these Muslim terrorists that killed the 11 Israeli Olympic athletes in Munich. Maybe some of you remember watching that. Fast forward to 9/11/1990, and we have the President George Bush telling Congress, out of these troubled times, we can see our fifth objective, a new world order coming into view. This is not about one small country, referring to the United States. It's a big idea, a new world order, where nations join in common cause to reach the common aspirations of mankind. And 11 years later, then, to the day, we have 9/11. Why are we seeing these kind of things? There's so much numerology involved in this, and I'm running out of time, obviously.
Also,
So getting to the bottom line of all the numerology, one of the things that I found out about the Illuminati, and this is not where I'm at because I'm not into the Kabbalah or numerology or all the rest of it, but they are. There'll be a family born, there'll be maybe several sons, because of the astrological symbols, the numerology around one, and blah, blah, blah. One will have a certain pathway chosen for them, and another will not. Days are chosen because of numerology. Events that they do, things that they do, are chosen for magical reasons. It's not an accident. There were 13 colonies that became the United States. 13 was chosen. They could have rearranged it in several ways. Bermuda wanted to join the United States during the American Revolution. They were told no. You know, we had to have 13 of them. 14 doesn't work. Look at the Confederate flag. How many stars are there on the Confederate flag? 13. They needed 13. There's a reason behind all of this. This numerology is very important. So you'll see all kinds of numerology, occult numerology, significance, and why this date was chosen, and the events and all the things around it. Now, some of these, the ways numbers work, it's almost like, the only way I can kind of explain it is quantum physics. When you study quantum physics, you start seeing that two particles can be connected, and it's like there's an interconnectedness between so much in life. There's so many people that were the bad guys in 9/11 whose names, when you put them into numerology, turned out to be 11. You know, I mean, you have all these patterns. Okay, so there are a lot of numerological patterns, and as to why that occurs, what all is involved in it, I mean, it's really beyond any one person manipulating it to happen. It's 911, of course, has its symbology. That's a call for help. 119 is the area code for Iraq and Iran. The Twin Towers looks like 11. The local station there that was radio station, which was radio station 11, used the towers as its 11 in their logo. You had Flight 11, 11 crew members, on and on. You have all of these numbers showing up, and some of this was probably controlled as part of the magic involved in it all happening. Some of it just maybe because of sort of like in a mysterious quantum physics type thing of light that you see patterns. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I was going to show you from the scriptures, that if God was giving us a message, this follows prophetic patterns that way too. We see when we go to Ezekiel 28, and in Ezekiel 28 it lays out, this prophetic pattern of judgment and how the people are acting. And over here on verse 16, it says that Lucifer, basically it's calling him the god of trade and commerce. And this whole pattern here is represented by what we see happening in the 9/11 event. So for those that are wanting to see a message from God, you can see a pattern there. It also ties in with the book of Revelations, and since I've essentially run out of time, I'm going to go to the final bottom line, the bottom line of the bottom line, and that is, as we go through life, the best thing that we can do is not get distracted by the traumas. The traumas are thrown out there to implant lies on us. Okay? But we, as a people, if we want to overcome, if we want to be overcomers, we need to have hope. Okay? Hope is something that is based on love and faith. It's not something that's easy to come by. And I want to read something from the Word of God. It says, "Finally, brothers, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are noble," is what another translation says. "Whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." We live each day a day at a time. We have to have hope. We have to have faith. You do what's right. When you lose hope, when you get beat down by all the traumas that they throw at you, then you're at the place where anything they say, you're going to buy. One of the reasons why people don't want to hear the truth, one of the reasons why we don't have a larger audience of wonderful people like yourself, is people who have given up their hope. That they'll tell you, I don't want to look at the truth, you can't do anything about it. So hope is essential. That's the bottom message I want to encourage you to have. Okay, thank you.
Do you see tomorrow as being a watershed possible day? I mean, 11/11.
You know, strange things have been happening in New York, and Kathy's daughter's in New York, so she knows firsthand the bizarre things that are happening in New York. You know, it's a possibility, but one thing that I think, if I was asked to predict what's going to happen, and unfortunately I haven't sat in on those meetings where they told all the plans, so I have to extrapolate or kind of fill in from the little bit that people will tell me of what they learned. My guess is what's going to happen tomorrow is not going to be a watershed event, but we're looking at, even though a watershed event doesn't happen, when you stir the pot, you evoke all these other memories. You know what I mean? It's like a constant stirring. I'm sure and I haven't gone on television to watch, but I'm sure that there's just this constant deluge of 9/11 stuff, you know. The propaganda machine is just inundating the people with the messages and the icons that they want them, the symbols, to get the knee-jerk reaction that they're wanting. And this is all part of stirring the pot of how all the cars that are entering New York City are being checked, and they cleared out the subways and didn't let people use the subways. And, in New York City, and I've been there a number of times, and every time I got, well, not every time, but a lot of times I was in New York City, I used the subway. I can't even picture New York functioning without using the subway. That is the main method of getting around. And you close that off, what are you doing to people? That's really stirring the pot. That's evoking, we're going to be attacked. That's evoking all this fear and all the rest of the confusion that 9/11 has generated.
I'd say you're very symbolically the towers in the upper world towards the heavens, but then the subway is almost like a symbolic underworld. We're kind of doing reverse in terms of goodness. I don't know what that means, but
They prepared people for it too in the Irene hurricane. They put the subways down.
Yeah, it definitely has earmarks of things that they had done before.
Chris, switching the subject slightly, can you address your own personal story briefly about how you were framed and how you came to get to see the underside of the system?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean.
Well,
The underside of the system, you mean prison?
yeah.
I guess you could refer to prison as the underside. There's probably a lot of seamy sides to this planet. Well, they bribed 3 criminals that were all guilty of major crimes. They gave one immunity from all his crimes. They forgave another about 130 years of prison time. And they released another out of prison. He had 3 more actual years to do. And brought them in and had them basically, I had one of the top lawyers in my appeal. He said, Fritz, all these people said was hearsay. They shouldn't have been allowed to say anything before. One of them that came in, that they gave immunity from all of his crimes, all he said was, is he heard through the grapevine more than 2 people did this, more than one person did this crime. Which, if you were being a rational thinking jury person, you'd say, that doesn't mean diddly squat. The rumor didn't say it was me, it just said that he just said that more than one person did this crime. But since I was the only person up there, the implication was me. So, the only honest thing that I ever heard a judge say, or the judicial system say during the proceedings, was the first judge that I went. And when I was first arraigned, the first judge looked the DA in the eye and said, there's absolutely no evidence against this man. I am going to release him to the street until his trial. And she did. And the DA was angry. He was red in the face, and he started making up a lot of lies, including the lie that they resurrected in this flyer about this place. But I'm a Nazi. I've never been a Nazi. I've never been a Nazi. I'm a follower of Christ. I don't believe in, I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a mad bomber. I'm none of these things, jackets that they have labeled me. But they have done a good job of demonizing me. And while the real criminals are walking free and are getting all kinds of awards and money from our, monetary payments from our government and everything. So that's why. One thing about prison that I would say is most people's images of death are from Hollywood, and not very good litmus test or gauge of what life is really like there. Every incarceration is going to be different. Every prison is going to be different. Each inmate is going to have his own experience. But I can say this with all certainty: using Hollywood to imagine what it's like is pretty good. As actually, for the first time, I got a chance to spend some time on myself. During the 1990s, I was on a mission to help the world. I spent a lot of time, full-time, 24/7, helping other people, totally neglecting myself. And when I went to prison, I had no choice but to quit helping other people, and it gave me a chance to spend some time for myself, which was a blessing. It's all past. I'm not ashamed of my time in prison because I know that I was doing honorable things. I'm an honorable person, and so I'm not ashamed of it. A lot of people like my watch. I bought my watch in prison. Some people that know that this came from prison are, Fritz, you need a different watch. I really don't care. I'm not ashamed. I know who I am. And that's not my identity. Other people, they can think what they want.
So were you able to keep doing research and everything in prison?
Yes and no. You're cut off from the world, and attempts to, let's put it this way, I'll give you an example. I wrote a book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, where I talk about the top Illuminati families. One of those families is the Li family, which is a Chinese family. There was, when I was at Sheridan, there was an inmate, and he had worked for the mafia, organized crime, and he had been the go-between between the Li Illuminati family and the mafia. And we sat down, and I had a notebook full of notes that I had taken. I guess you could, whatever you want to call that, interviewing, I guess. Right? Well, a corrections officer in the federal system, we call them COs, he came in and drew my notebook with me. So that's an example of how it was not a place that was conducive to getting a lot accomplished. I had a book sent in from France that was, that one of the first books, if not maybe the first major book, exposing 9/11. Do you remember? They couldn't get it published in the United States, so it was translated into English, but it was printed and published in France and then sent in, right? The corrections officer found it and he threw it away. However, most of the work in prison is done by prison orderlies, and after it was thrown in the garbage, one of the prison orderlies just fished it out and gave it back to me. Yes?
How did you get into this line of research?
Not by design. There's many different ways to answer that. There's several different streams of events that happen. Early on in life, back in 1978, at that point in time in my life, I had joined the Old Order Amish Mennonites because I'm a conscientious objector to war. In contrast with all of the nonsense that people tell you and all the nonsense that's out there on the internet, I'm a pacifist. I'm a conscientious objector to war. And I was a member of the Amish, Old Order Amish Mennonites, horse and buggy. And I had dreams that asked me, I believe, and there's no other explanation for the dreams, that God was asking me to leave the Amish and go out into the world and let people know what was happening in the world. Okay, so it was a prophetic call on my life. And I obeyed that call. I left the Amish, and I started to do that. And Christian people talked me out of doing it. They told me God doesn't have prophets today. They talked me out of doing that. So for about 10 years there, after I gave up doing that, I was like, didn't have a purpose in life. Life kind of beat me up really bad. And long story short, while I was getting beat up in life, my life in general, in order to do something positive with my life, I became a Christian missionary to Jehovah's Witnesses. Not a Jehovah's Witness, but most people that are Christians slam the door in Jehovah's Witnesses' face. But I became somebody who wanted to help pull them out of the Watchtower Society, their mind control. They have a low level of mind control that the Watchtower Society does to these Jehovah's Witnesses. I was trying to rescue them, and then after doing that for about 10 years, I was like praying, God, why am I messing with all these little peons with their book bags going 2 by 2 along the street? Why don't you just give me the power to destroy the Watchtower Society? That's the authoritarian head that controls all of these people, If I destroy the Watchtower Society, then I'll take care of all these little people in the street with their book bags. So I was praying for that. Well, I got my prayer answered, but I didn't realize what I was praying. Because the way my prayer got answered is an insider gave me inside information that the heads of the Watchtower Society, the string pullers, who are Illuminati, would just simply get on the phone and call up the string pullers of the LDS Mormon Church, and they would collaborate. Here we have 2 churches that pretend to the world that they're God's only sole organization, and the string pullers are collaborating together and actually belong to a higher organization, the Illuminati. So then I realized if my dreams were fulfilled of destroying the Watchtower Society, I'd just be cutting off one arm of an octopus, and all of these little peons would run to the other arms of the octopus. So I went where angels fear to tread. I went to the next level. Why stop with an arm of the octopus? Let's go for the heart of the octopus, which is the Illuminati. That's how I got into working against the Illuminati. I hadn't intended on it. And once I got involved, God started bringing in a lot into my life to allow me to actually accomplish what I was to do. And then I realized this was fulfillment of what I was supposed to do many years before that I had given up. And so realizing that this is what I was called to do and God was giving me the means to do it, I continued to do it. But I was really going, I was in over my head, and I was going for angels fear to tread. And, the story behind the story, I don't even know if I could remember all the strange things that happened. I mean, for about 10 years there, my life, have you ever watched the movie Enemy of the State?
Yeah.
My life was an absolutely crazy merry-go-round. I had CIA-type gumshoes watching me 24/7, people trying to shoot me, people trying to run me off the road and kill me. I was watched all the time. I had people surround me that were double agents trying to destroy me. I mean, my life was nuts. Until I finally got some peace and quiet by going to prison. And I walked into that cell the first day and I'm going, thank you, Lord, I finally got some peace and quiet. I'm serious.
How long have you been up?
Since March. This is my first formal talk that I've given.
Just kind of off the subject, we always had a discussion of the Civil War. I happen to really know a lot about it. Is there a lot of symbology that deals with the Civil War that you have discovered?
Yeah, all of these things, all of these wars involve a lot of symbology, but they also involve, let me answer that question by going to another war. Because we're dealing with icons and symbols. I'm going to tie it in with icons and symbols. What is the thing that children draw the most? A house. Why? Because a house represents security. Okay? If you want to provoke a fight with somebody, you have to touch something that means something to them, right? Like maybe this kid here, he has no respect for his mother. He's constantly sassing her. But you tell him your mother wears army boots, you've got a fight on your hand. You see what I mean? You touched something that meant something to him. So they try to pick icons that are going to represent something that we will react to. Right? So one of the icons they used is we had a battleship. right? And it was sitting there in Havana Harbor, and it blew up. Nobody knew who blew it up, but somebody had to have blown it up. So somebody had to be the bad guy. And since it was Cuba, why, it must be the people that were running Cuba, which are the Spanish. So that's a good reason. We'll go to war and kick the Spanish out of all of their colonies. It was the same thing with 9/11 all over again, except this happened in 1898, which is a little bit over 100 years before 9/11, but the same thing. Nobody knew who did it, but it was sure lickety-split got us into a war, and ships are used as an icon a lot of times to get us into war. In fact, you will find out if you study the war, almost every war that we have been in has been related to a ship being attacked. The American Revolution, the 1802 war with the Barbary Pirates, the 1812, War of 1812, Civil War. The Civil War got started because of some ships going to Fort Sumter being fired on. So they have used ships as an icon to represent the power. It's sort of like, you know, insulting somebody's mother. Oh, you captured one of our ships, you know. What about World War I? We have, and the world had an overflow of aristocrats. So one dead aristocrat the world can handle. I mean, it's no big loss, right? We got plenty of rich nobility running around in Europe. But one guy is assassinated, and the world gets into a crazy world war where millions of people are killed. Now, if you were some alien, intelligent race, species looking at Earth, planet Earth, and you're like, they killed one excess noble, and they decided to go to war and kill millions over that, you know? But why was that noble so significant? He was an icon, because the Austro-Hungarian Empire was an empire that people questioned its future. And who was the icon of its future? The heir to the throne. He was the heir to the throne of the Habsburgs' Austro-Hungarian Empire. So by killing him, they were killing an icon. So there's a lot of icons used, and including in the Civil War, they used the ships going to resupply Fort Sumter. And a little known fact while we're on that, the Confederates, when they were laying siege to Fort Sumter, had given written instructions to the U.S. government. They said, we will not hurt the people in Fort Sumter. We will supply them with all the food and water that they need. And during that siege, the federal troops were supplied by the Confederates that had them under siege. So there was no need for federal ships to be going to Fort Sumter. They told the lie to the American public, we needed to resupply Fort Sumter. But Fort Sumter was being taken care of. All its necessities were more than being satisfied. All the South had said is, according to the Southern view, Fort Sumter is in South Carolina. South Carolina is another country. It's seceded. It's joined the Confederate States of America. We want the land returned to the Confederacy. Would you please leave? So they used the icon of a ship in that way. That's an example.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
The World Trade Center, the World Trade Center towers are icons of the wealthy. All of them
Exactly.
are which they jump up and say, hey, you know, Apollo, there's an enemy for it.
Right. I didn't get to go into all of the symbology or the meaning behind the towers. Those towers were built by the elite, rich people of this country during the 19th century and in part in the 20th century. People like the Rockefellers, to show how rich and powerful our string pullers have become. They wanted to build these massive symbols to their power and wealth, and that's what those were. They were icons, and these two buildings were called World Trade Center specifically for a reason. It could be been called other meanings, but even the name World Trade Center was to evoke certain things. The world center of trade is there. And then when you go and see that Babylon the Great and Lucifer are connected with world trade, you see that this can also be allowed by God as a symbol of judgment against Lucifer and his world empire. So there's all kinds of levels of understanding this, which is one of the things that I frequently try to convey to people, is in understanding the Civil War or so many other things, there are many different levels that we can approach understanding. And I've just scratched the surface.
Were the trade towers designed and built to be brought down?
I believe that they had built within them the capability of taking them down. From what I understand, and I could be incorrect because I'm basing this on information that was given to me, that when they built them, they knew that sometime they were going to have to dismantle them, and so they constructed them so that they could be taken down at some point. Now, the Port of New York had condemned the buildings, and they were going to have to leave them vacant within a matter of months. So Silverstein, who insured them, he bought them. The reason why he bought them on pennies to the dollar is they were condemned buildings. And then he made a killing. He made billions of dollars off of the insurance because he insured them for a terrorist attack after he spent a few millions buying them because they had been condemned. So it's very convenient. When the buildings got condemned by New York City, there was no way to bring them down because it was too cost prohibitive to legally take them down, dismantle them, and build something in their place. So how convenient that we have a terrorist attack, bring them down, so that we have all kinds of agendas going on.
Why wasn't that brought up, or didn't the news media want to bring that up?
Exactly. That's my whole point. Thank you. That's my whole point behind, these are the kind of questions, if you look at the articles that I started writing the very morning, I wrote an article that was put out on the internet that morning of 9/11, where I started asking questions right then. And I continued asking questions from day one. We need answers. There are questions, important questions, and we are not getting answers. And then you get the news media coming back and saying people like us are happy that it happened, and we don't have a heart, and trying to silence us and telling people don't go to the internet. Who's covering up? Who's an accomplice to this crime? I want to ask the American people that.
See, I think this is the last question.
The Pentagon and tank buildings.
Oh, yes, the Pentagon. The Pentagon was built with all kinds of Illuminati symbology to it. And so yeah. So that was one of the things that I wanted to get to is not only do we have the Twin Towers icon and symbology, but we have to marry that with Twin Towers married to the Pentagon's symbology, so we have a broader meaning here. We have a sentence instead of a couple words. You see what I mean? So yeah, the whole thing's very deep. There's a lot of occult symbolism in all of this. It was chosen to have meaning on many different levels, and so you can see that the people that planned this have put a lot of thought into it. In fact, the guy that became Homeland Security, as we were finding out last night, his job prior to this had been to make myths. He was a professional myth maker, and then from that world, he became Homeland Security.
He's in charge of commission.
So, isn't that interesting?
Do you have any information available or how the public can access your information? Like a website or a way to find more stuff from you?
Or your books?
All of my books, or most of my books, have been pirated and put up on the internet for free. So somewhere you can go and find them. I have occasionally a few copies. Like I brought a copy, which is one of my books. I'm going to have a blog soon, and then some of my talks, like the Prophecy Club talk, which I gave in major cities, it's on the internet, and I would suggest if you go to that particular talk, I think that was the best one that gives an overview of my information.
Are they on YouTube or where do you find them?
A lot of them are on YouTube and other places.